Boston, Crockett's Victory Garden.
Welcome to Crockett's Victory Garden. I'm Jim Crockett, and I guess right away you see that I'm not standing in my victory garden. Instead, I'm in a garden of an old New England home built in 1853. Well, there's an ancient perennial garden in here, and I don't know if the garden was laid out about the time that the house was built or not, but I know it's been here for many, many years. The flowers have, and the weeds have overgrown it. The paths have sort of encroached upon the garden. But today, I want to revitalize it. Of course, you can see that it's raining out here today, but I had a lot of experience in the rain working with an English gardener whose specialty was perennials. And we know that it's rain such as this that gets that fall garden going, and it's this time of year in September. It's one of the very best times to set out your perennial garden. Most of the plants have gone through their growth period. They have actually formed their root buds, which will come up early next spring. Well, first of all, in this garden, let's evaluate what I have here. Let's look, first of all, we have a daylily. Now, it's popping out from amongst a bunch of old witchgrass in here, but a plant such as a daylily, which is able to survive the years and years of neglect that this garden has seen, shows that it's a tough plant and it's one that's worth saving. Now, this one has blossomed rather recently. The seed pod on it is still green. And we're going to see some others up here where the seed pod is brown. Now, even though I don't know their exact blooming date, I know that the one whose seed pod is brown blossomed before this one did. So we can arrange for that in resetting these plants in the garden. Next to it, I have here a coreopsis, this great big plant in here, and you can see this lovely coreopsis blossom. A hardy perennial. This is Coreopsis lanceolata. Now, a plant such as this is not only a good perennial by itself, but it's one of those perennials whose seeds you can save and start more plants. Now, in the back here, you'll see some tall gladiolus. Now, the present owner, who moved here in the spring, put these bulbs in. Now, these, of course, will not live over winter in our part of the country, and in preparation for revitalizing this garden, I will dig these and put them in another part of the garden and let the bulbs ripen. But for the moment, I'm going to let them stay there. Now, I see here a great big old milkweed. I have to pull something like that out of there, and we'll eventually get the roots. We have other weeds in here. But down in the front, this is what I'd like to show you. Here is an oriental poppy. Now, oriental poppies come in many colors, but the chief one of the older varieties was scarlet with a black center, 4 big petals, and a great big black spot at the base of each petal. Culture on this one. They come up very early in the spring, blossom in early summer, then die down and disappear. Along in the fall, again, they come back up again, and we make new foliage which lives over winter, and then we start the new growth again in the spring. The point of it is you can move these while they're dormant. To dig such a plant now would be almost assuring its demise. You have to move them when they're dormant. You perhaps saw a show a few weeks ago where I had the dormant roots, cut them into pieces, and we could start a number of plants. Now, you can move them if they're in a container, but to dig them right out of the garden would be mighty difficult to make them live. Now we have next to it an enormous garden phlox. You can see it must be at least 4 feet tall, and it's growing out of a great big clump of daylilies. Well, up here, the very fact that it's growing among the daylilies and the fact that it's close to the path convinces me, even without looking at this scrawny blossom, that this plant, you see, is not a good variety of phlox. This is what happens when we get the so-called reversion, when the phlox reverts. This plant is a seedling of some old variety which has since been crowded out by some of these fast-growing plants. This thing belongs in the trash pile, and that's where I'm going to put it eventually. Just as way out here at the edge of the garden, I know it was never planted there. And the same thing applies with this one. There's one right down in there that I know is trash. It doesn't belong out in that part of the garden at all. The fact that it's there means that it's a seedling. It's bound to be inferior to the new varieties. When we get a plant such as this, whose individual florets are approximately a ½ inch across, and we know that the new varieties have florets as big as a 50-cent piece and just magnificent trusses of flowers, we know very well that this type of thing doesn't belong in a new garden. Well, here, look at this big weed. This garden has all kinds of trash in here, and this kind of stuff just has to come out. All of this witchgrass will come out. Here's another one of those seedling phlox, and you see in behind it a gladiolus, a very lovely color. Now here's a flower that was put in this spring. We won't sacrifice this plant at all. We'll dig this up and save the bulbs, and they'll rest over for another year. Well, down here in front of the glad, way down close to the ground, I have a chrysanthemum is showing. Now this chrysanthemum plant, there's some glad foliage around it, but this is the chrysanthemum. And here, at this time of year, there is no indication of buds, flower buds, which would lead me to think that this variety may have been here for years and years and years, probably blossoms so late in the fall, as the old varieties used to do, that the blossoms get nipped by the frost every year. Well, I'm going to give it one more chance, because I'll observe it this fall and see whether or not those flowers are up to par. Now, it could be that this plant is one which the previous owner just sort of popped in here. You know, it seems to me that they couldn't afford to throw anything away. They had a garden and they would put in all kinds of plants. Now, right in here is a daylily, which apparently is not overcrowded at all. I'm going to simply fertilize this plant and allow it to stay there. Next to it, I have a bearded iris, which I've already moved in and divided. And you notice that the rhizome, if you can look way down close to the ground here, well, we can see it maybe on this one, the rhizome, the root of the bearded iris lies right at the ground level, and that will assure that we get flowers. Well, next to it we have a globe thistle. And the globe thistle has gone by for this year, but we'll allow that plant to stay. It's a good place for it here in the middle of the garden. I think after we've fed it a little bit, it'll become a bigger plant as well. And over in here, there's quite a clump of Madonna lilies. Now, Madonna lilies grow to be about 30 to 36 inches tall, have snow-white flowers with golden anthers, extremely fragrant, blossom in June, die down to the ground, and then in the fall send out this foliage which lies on the ground over winter. A lot of people seeing growth in the fall said, oh, that's too bad, they're going to freeze. Don't be the least bit concerned. They'll come through the winter, blossom for you next year. Well, in digging through this garden, I found all sorts of bulbs. Now here is a clump of, this is the poet's narcissus. I would divide a clump such as this and replant them. Those are worth saving and replanting right here in the garden. But I've also found some tulip bulbs. Well, such a little puny bulb as this simply can't produce a good flower. This bulb, we'll plant over in the vegetable garden and give it a couple of years of good soil and good culture. Maybe it'll be big enough to throw a blossom. That's how they do in Holland. They divide them every year and grow them on. Here is an Easter lily, which someone has put in the garden. This too, this will stand being moved around. We'll get these right out of the way. And then I'll show you the gladiolus, which we've already pulled out of the ground at this end of the bed. Now, here, let me get so you can get through, see it without that fork being in the way. One corm This one down here was planted this spring. As it grew during the summer, it produced 2 stems with 2 blossoms on it, and then we had these 2 bulbs for next year, plus all these little baby bulbs on the side. This we'll put over in the other garden, heel them in, we call them, and allow the bulbs to mature, and then they will blossom year after year. But if they are tender, they have to come in. Well, finally, down at the very end of the garden, we have a nice clump of peonies. Don't like to be disturbed. They'll go on for 20 or 30 years. And notice, even late in the fall, the foliage is really good. So now we come to, we see what we're going to save. It looks as if I've practically cleaned this bed out, but I've saved a lot of those plants, and we're going to go now and divide them after we've improved the soil somewhat. And I'm going to begin improving the soil this way. We're going to start by adding some lime. This is ordinary ground limestone. It's been sitting in the rain and has a little crust on it. We'll spread some of this right around on the soil. Make it look as though there's just been a new snowfall. And that will sweeten the soil. We know we made a soil test here last week in the same garden where we put a lawn in, and the soil was tested about 5.5. And I know that that's not sweet enough for perennials. They'd like to be around 6 or 6.5. Well, we've prepared the soil into here, so that takes care of the lime for a minute. Next thing we're going to add to here is some slow-release fertilizer. And you've seen me use this before. This is a type of thing whose nutrients will be released over a period of approximately a year. There's little globules of fertilizer. Work those in. Then we come to the real key on making this garden grow for years. And that is, I want to put on this garden a lot of organic matter, and I'm going to use peat moss. This is something that you can get at any garden center, and there's nothing in the world that's going to make your garden grow as well as organic matter. Now, a perennial garden, in a sense, is much like a lawn. It's going to be here for years and years and years. This is your chance. If that peony is going to sit there for a decade or more without being divided, you've got to give the plant a half a break to begin with when you plant it. So we spread some of this peat moss around and dig it into the ground. This is the key to good gardening. I really don't care what kind of a plant you're putting in. If you put the organic matter into the soil, and if you take care of the soil pH, most of your troubles will be taken care of. This is good soil. You see we have some nice witchgrass roots in it. You know, it's a funny thing. If your weeds grow pretty well in your garden, chances are your flowers will grow well too. So you don't want to be upset when you find some weeds. This type of a garden, if you had all the time in the world, you can dig this whole thing over and go deeper and deeper and deeper in here, but chiefly I want to just make 2 or 3 quick passes through here to show you what I would like to plant in this part of the garden. See a few more narcissus bulbs. Okay. Now I want to begin by showing you some of these bulbs, or some of these perennials that we took out. And the first is this gigantic clump of daylilies. Just look at that enormous thing. Now a plant such as this is not very difficult to divide if you're willing to treat it. What apparently is a little bit rough, but actually you won't hurt it a bit. Just get rid of that foliage, because those roots are practically indestructible. I often wonder about the easiest kind of a business to go into in the perennial business is to start growing daylilies. In a very short time you have daylilies to give away by the hundreds. Now we take a plant such as that. Now comes the trick. How do you divide a great big clump such as that? Well, the easy way to do is to use 2 spading forks back to back. So we'll begin by putting one fork down in like this and another one beside it. Just pry them apart, just like that. Now you see what a handsome clump we have? This type of a clump we'll put right over in here. That will take care of that. Now before we actually put in those big ones, I'm going to start here at the end of the bed and give you a flower sequence. Here I have some Sweet Williams. Now these Sweet Williams plants are some which are seed I sowed in July. Now they're ready to go in the garden. These will blossom next May. This is a biennial. Well, every year you have to sow more seeds of them to grow your plants on for the following year. We have biennials and perennials go into a so-called perennial border. Well, this is the first way that we're going to start on this corner, but this is only the beginning. I want to get a sequence of bloom in here. So the next thing I'm going to do is to plant in among these some tulip bulbs. Now these are some tulip bulbs which are in Crockett's Victory Garden in Boston this spring. We saved the bulbs and here they are ready to go in the garden again. Now get them down 4 or 5 inches in the ground. Like to get them top up, that is the pointed side up, but you know, someone has said the bulbs are smart enough that they can find their way to the surface anyway, and they certainly can. Now we're going to do the same thing over in the other end of this garden, or this other side of this peony. What we'll end up with is this type of color arrangement. Beginning in late April or early May, the tulips will come up and do their thing. They'll be blossoming. That's a yellow tulip with some red on it. Along in the latter part of May, we will have Sweet Williams, pinks and reds and maroons and whites covering this area. Then, along about the last of May, we will have the peonies begin to blossom. So for 6 to 8 weeks, this end of the garden is going to be just a mass of color. Now we can't keep an area like this going all summer unless we plant in here some annuals, and that's easy to do. Once these go by, we can put in petunias or marigolds or whatever we'd like. But now we'll put in a clump of daylilies. You've seen me use this army trenching tool before, but certainly it's easy to use on an easy tool to use in a perennial garden. Again, use your feet, get right in like that and divide them up and firm the soil in around them. That looks easy enough. Now we come to phlox, to Siberian iris. And on the Siberian iris, the division is a little bit different because the root structure is different. We'll simply use a sharp spade, just cut that right apart. There we are. That's a fibrous root system. And let's see what I want to do with that one. This again is a blue, you see, with a yellow daylily beside it. We'll have a good color combination up in that end of the garden. Now, a little bit straggly. Whack them off a bit. Well, if there's one thing that's true, the perennials themselves are pretty tough plants. What I want to do with these is to put a clump of 3 iris right in there. Now this is the Siberian iris. Will blossom in June, probably at the same time that daylily will. And we'll put a clump of 3 right in there. Now we can follow. Some time to put another one in. Now you all who've worried about how tough plants are and how I appear to be treating these a little roughly, don't be the least bit concerned, because there's no one cares about them any more than I do, but I know that they're not going to be harmed in the least by this kind of treatment. They'll be better for it. Well, we'll go on from here and we'll put some phlox in over in here, plant some baby's breath. We're going to plant some more sweet williams over here. But at this point, let's go up to the other end of the garden. I'll show you what we're going to do up there. Remember I said that I was widening the bed. Thought you might like to see just how we did that. First thing that you see, I'm sure, is this hose all along here. This is just plain garden hose, and I can use that to form a curve at that end of the bed. But this is the tool that I use, just an edging tool. This has a place here so that you can put that right on the sod any place you want to, and put your foot down and it'll cut right through. Well, now we have made a circle down in here, and then you can take your spade and slip those pieces of sod right out of the way. That kind of a thing belongs over in the compost pile. Now let's go right around here, because what I want to show you first of all is how I've redesigned this garden a little bit. I'm imagining visitors coming up the driveway from behind me, and what is the first thing they're going to see except this perennial garden? Well, to give this garden just a feeling of intimacy, I have brought this bed around rather than have it end abruptly. It comes right around here in a graceful curve, and again I've used that hose laid on the ground to mark the circle that I wanted. Then at the very end of the bed, to form a strong accent, we have a spreading form of Japanese yew. This plant can be kept at this height, roughly 2 to 2.5 feet, as long as I want it. Down in the front, to anchor this end, is a cranberry cotoneaster. And isn't that a pretty thing? Beautiful plant, will never grow over 1.5 feet tall, can be kept 9 inches or so if you'd like. And then I'll show you, we will put bulbs. Actually, I found these bulbs growing here in the bed and put them in a flower pot. This is the so-called autumn crocus, which is colchicum. This will open up to a beautiful lavender pink flower. But the real thing that I have to show you before this program is over is how we plant peonies, because this is one of the things I promised for this week. I have a peony root. I want you to observe very closely these pink eyes right here at the base of the stem. These will be the stems for next year. And these will be, at the ends of these stems will be where the flowers appear. Now the trick on planting peonies, once your soil is prepared, is to set those buds so that they're no more than 2 inches beneath the surface of the soil. So this is what we'll do. We've added lime in here, and you see when I get all through, you see those buds are not very deep in the soil. And what really happens, so many times people will put their peonies in too deeply. And then they'll complain, you know, I planted peonies and they just never did blossom. Well, you can't expect them to blossom if you set them in so that the buds are more than 2 inches beneath the surface. Even 1.5 inches is good. They're as hardy as a rock of Gibraltar. We'll see if we have time to get a couple of questions today, and we'll get in out of this rain. Well, first question. Is it possible to grow apple and peach trees from the seeds that you get in the fruit? Of course you can, but what you get for results is just anyone's guess. You know that you won't get what you started with. If you sow the seeds of a Macintosh apple, you'll get an apple, maybe not be red, maybe green or yellow, because apples have a very complex ancestry, and so does peaches. So do peaches. Please tell me how to determine the maturity of gold nugget squashes. Gold nuggets are rather a rich orange when they are growing, and they turn a little bit dull when they're ripe. And that's the time to get them. Usually you see on the bottom of the fruit where it rests on the ground a section which is rather bright yellow rather than orange. Don't pick them so long as there are any green stripes in the fruit. They're not mature and they won't keep. I'm a new gardener, would like to plant a bed of peonies. Well, I've heard that peonies need ants on the buds in order to bloom. Are the ants necessary? No, the ants are up trying to get some of that little sweetness, nectar, which is on the outside of the buds. They won't hurt the peonies. I wouldn't bother trying to even to get rid of them. Now, here's one. My gourds do not last very long. I thought gourds lasted for years. What's the best way to cure and preserve them? Pick them when they're fully ripe. Dry them for 2 or 3 months perhaps, or at least a month, in a dry place where there is still pretty warm. Then you can shellac them, and that shellac will preserve them, but they won't keep for years. They'll be good for a number of months. After a while, they begin to look a little puny. All the outside leaves on my African violets are turning brown and wilting. They are blooming and growing in the center. What am I doing wrong? They've been in the same location for 2 years. Your plants are just getting old. And as a matter of fact, I bet you, if you were to look carefully, you would find that those leaves are growing on little stems, almost like little palm trees. Why don't you take some of those leaves, snap them off, start new plants from them, and those young plants will be the ones that will blossom for you. Where white clover is considered to be a fixative for nitrogen, would you advise leaving it in my vegetable garden? No, you can plant it in your vegetable garden and dig it into the ground. It makes a very fine, what we call a green manure, to reinforce the nitrogen in the soil and, of course, the organic material in the soil. Well, that's all we have time for this week. But next week, we're going to be planting paper white narcissus. Those are the ones that will blossom for us during the winter months. I'm Jim Crockett in Crockett's Victory Garden, and I hope you enjoy the program every week.